Hey everyone, my name is Martin Owusu-Antwi, and then I'm presenting my thesis titled Cost Benefit Analysis for Security Control, Spring 2023 class. Abstract. The focus of this study is viewing cost benefit analysis as a tool for sound decision making in organizations. We can use this study to help understand the methods and frameworks used to evaluate the feasibility or the economic feasibility of several projects. In this thesis or capstone, I looked at the two different approaches to CBA, the information technology approach and the cybersecurity approach. Introduction. Cost benefit helps maintain good and healthy profit and loss margins in companies. This is very essential for the longevity of a company because this is how companies last longer, basically. If a company runs at a loss and then can't turn over a profit, then they put in too much money into the company or the item or the organization to the point where they can't keep it up. The challenges of CBA or cost benefit analysis is generally the volatile nature of it, meaning the value of assets can either depreciate or it can appreciate over a matter of time or minutes, seconds. The risk level is generally grouped into three, being the low, the moderate, and the high. When we say risk level is low, it means that if the risk is exploited by the adversary, it means that it will impact the company, but the impact will be so minimum that it might not even be felt. If we say risk is moderate, it means that we will feel the impact of the risk when the vulnerability is exploited, but the company could somewhat still function, if not fully. If we say risk is high, that means that when the risk is exploited, the company comes to a halt, production comes to a halt, and even in some cases, the organization completely stops functioning forever. Literature review. So when it comes to, like I said earlier, we're going to group this into two different approaches. So we're going to look at it from the IT approach, and we're going to look at it from the cybersecurity approach. I don't know if I already said this, but the main focus of this is the cybersecurity approach. As you can see from the title, we're looking at security controls. So it's more about cybersecurity, not IT. But just for this study, I tackle the IT approach, and I'm going to tackle the CS approach, and then we'll kind of compare both to see and kind of help us know which one we can use for which situation, if that makes sense. Oh, I'm sorry. In the IT approach, cost, we look at cost itself. There's different types of cost. There's three types of cost: the direct cost, indirect cost, and opportunity cost. An example of direct cost would be, for example, the labor cost, how much it costs to outsource, have a contractor come in, or even have an in-house person come in and look at stuff. That's direct cost. Indirect costs, it varies. It could be, for example, the organization works in a building, they have to pay rent, they still have to pay utility, they got to pay parking, like permits and all that stuff. That falls under indirect cost. Opportunity cost is basically the cost that a company or an organization incurs because they decided to take another project or they decided to take another path. So the cost, the opportunity cost is the cost foregone. Okay. So with the IT approach, it's two frameworks or two models, be it the NPV, the net present value, or the BCR, the benefit cost ratio. With the cyber approach, this approach focuses not only on the monetary aspect, but looks at it as a whole, the impact level about like a vulnerability or a risk. So this is kind of like a holistic look for CBA in terms of the topic we're talking about. So this approach is grouped into two, the quantitative and qualitative. Somewhere down on the slide, I would explain what qualitative and quantitative means. Sorry. Once there's different type of risk. So once a company identifies the risk, we have four ways of handling risk. Like I said, risk can be low, medium, or high. These ways of handling risk is risk reduction, risk avoidance, risk transfer, risk acceptance. So risk reduction is a way of handling risk. That means that the risk is reduced to an acceptable level. It does not mean that the risk is nullified or like I guess like canceled, but it just means that the risk is reduced to an acceptable level that wouldn't really impact the level. So it could be that we're reducing the risk from a medium to a low impact. That way the company can be able to, I guess, soldier on with the low impact. So risk avoidance should be high on your list, especially if the risk impact is high. So we should try not to do anything leading to this where because when this risk is in question, we have to avoid it because it's more than likely a high impact risk situation. Risk is transferred, risk transfer. The risk is transferred, for example, if we have something on our service and we don't want to like we scared that it might be attacked, we can move it to a cloud somewhere, and then it's like we transferring the risk surface or like the risk impact or like the risk somewhere else far away from something that might be catastrophic. So that's risk transfer. Risk acceptance usually almost certainly always has to do with low impact risk situations. At this point of handling risk, we just accept it. We just tell ourselves, hey, this risk is here to stay, and we can still function as an organization, as a group of people with this risk. So we just accept the risk. So with the methodology using a cyber approach, I looked at two. That's the quantitative. So like I said, quantitative usually always is based on numbers. It's a numbers thing where we have strict formulas that you just kind of input the values in and then you calculate to get the CBA. So with the quantitative methodology for the IT approach, I looked at two of them. Like I said earlier, the NPV net present value and the BCR benefit cost ratio. These usually follow vigorous or strict framework of formulas for the calculation, as seen over here. BCR. So basically, BCR has to do with calculating the sum of the present value of the total of a future benefit divided by the sum of the present value of total future projected cost of the project. Another thing I'd like to say before this is for BCR is very great for short-term project because the volatile nature of it can't really affect it if it's a short project because we're going to find the total present value of the item within a short period of time. But if it's a long project where it's an ongoing thing that's going to be 2-3 years, even 5+ years, then the BCR is not really ideal because of the volatile nature. We probably won't get the right value and then the right projection for the project. Methodology for the cybersecurity approach. I looked at the qualitative version of it. There's two models in it, the DREAD and the CVSS method. The DREAD, we calculate that by, as you can see, DREAD stands for, it's like the first letter of this forms the DREAD. So we have the damage, reproducibility, exploitability, affected user, and discoverability. So with the damage, this means that what's the impact level of the risk being exploited? Reproducibility, just like the name says, is like how easy is the attack to be replicated, to be reproduced? Exploitability is the complexity of the code or the attack. Was it difficult to produce? Was it difficult to launch? Was it difficult to execute? Affected user is basically the surface area of the people that are going to be affected or impacted by this risk. Discoverability is the ease at which this risk is discovered. The CVSS method, I'm trying to move this. Sorry, the CVVS method, the base metric, it's three of them. The base metric, temporal metric, and the environmental metric. So I'll start with the environmental metric. It's basically the environment that the risk is found in. What's the vulnerability of that environment? The base metric is that also defines or falls under the exploitability, as I spoke about earlier in the DREAD, and the impact level. We already know the impact level: low, medium, and high. So with the temporal metric, it talks about the span, the longevity, the life of the vulnerability. And then that's the CVSS method and calculating it. These two, the CVSS and the DREAD, all falls under the qualitative method of the CS approach. Now we move to my favorite, the quantitative model for the CS approach. So I spoke about three of them. There's the SLE, the single loss expectancy, the ALE, the annualized loss expectancy, and the ARO, annualized rate of occurrence. So with the SLE, basically, this is the formula for calculating the LSE. So we find the AV, which is the asset value. We find the AV, which is the asset value, times the exposure factor, the EF. For example, asset value is the cost of the value of the asset. So let's say, for example, I have a car, a BMW, that costs $30,000. That will be my AV. And then the exposure factor is the variation of loss when the vulnerability is exploited. So I have a BMW that costs $3,000, and then I'm driving in Baltimore and I hit a pothole, and then I lose two of my tires, my front tires. They kind of like burst into air, and the exposure factor of that happening, of damaging my value, let's say for example, is 0.5. So now to find the SLE of that whole scenario I just gave, is $3,000 times 0.5. The sum of it is the SLE. So with the annualized loss expectancy, it's kind of like, I'm glad we talked about SLE first. So basically, okay, let me skip to the ARO and I'll come back to ALE, and we'll find out why later on. The annualized rate of occurrence, the ARO, basically is the frequency at which a vulnerability or risk occurs. How often is it being exploited is basically what the ARO is. To calculate it, we need to find the X amount of incidents divided by the number of years that occurs. So for example, the ARO for, let me use another example with the BMW and the potholes in Baltimore. So every time I go to Baltimore at least once a month, for the year, that is 12 times. Every time I go to Baltimore, I run a pothole and my tire is burst. So that means the number of incidents is 12 divided by number of years is 1. So this will kind of like give you an idea of how to calculate for the ARO. How often does this risk happen? That's another way to put it. Now we come back to ALE, the annual loss expectancy. To calculate for this, we have to find how often it occurs, that's the ARO, and then the single loss expectancy. Every time it happens that one time, how much does it affect us? How much does it set us back? That's the ALE. So for the purpose of this study, I created a scenario. I'll read. In a real-life practical scenario, a company, Adidas Incorporated, purchases an ultra-modern firewall from McAfee Company for $4,000 annually. Because there have been reportedly 6 attacks in a period of a year, the accounting department consists of 10 employees who are all paid at an annually rate of $42 for a 4-hour week schedule, and they're paid $84 an hour for overtime. This department experiences malicious attacks, a denial of service attack. These attacks usually last for a period of 3 days, leaving the employees to do nothing. Calculate the CBA. So with the calculation of the CBA to find the ALE, like I said earlier, is the ARO times the SLE. The ARO is, like I said, how often does it happen? So it's going to be the number of occurrences. Like the question said, it's 6. It happens 6 times a year over the month, which is 12. So you get 0.5, and then the SLE is $10,000, which is the asset value of the company, Adidas Incorporated. So you times this by the exposure factor, which is 0.5, and you get $500 times 0.5, and you get this. We're not done. We also need to factor in the fact we need to include the fact that in an 8-hour shift for 3 days is the cost the company incurs. Remember, we spoke about direct cost, indirect cost, and opportunity cost. Is the cost the company incurs whenever these attack happens. This is calculated like this: 8 hours times the number of days, 3. So basically, every employee or one employee is missing 24 hours of work. You multiply this 24-hour work by how much they're paid hourly, is this $1,008. $1,008 per employee. You multiply this by the number of employees in the accounting department, that is $10,080. So therefore, this is the monetary cost the company incurs every single time there's an attack, and the employees can't go to work. SLE, like I already said over there, is the AV times the EF, and that's 500. And then the ARO is the number of incident times the year. 6 divided by 12. Calculating the CVS base score metric. So the attack vector is local. The access complexity is medium. The authenticity, none. Confidentiality impact, yep. Integrity impact, yep. Availability impact, complete. So when you calculate all of this, the base score is 7.2. The dread, DREAD, the damage, that's like I already explained, the impact level of the attack is 3. The reproducibility of the attack is 2. Exploitability of the attack is 1. Affected user, the impact is 3. Discoverability is 3. So this is the key for it. 3 is the highest. So as you can see, discoverability, affected user, and the damage is the highest. 2 is medium. Reproducibility is medium. The exploitability, which is the launch or the complexity of the launch, is 1. It is a low. So when we put together all of this, we get 12. Meaning that, as you can see down there, I don't know if my picture is covering it from you guys seeing it, but down there you would find out that the risk is high, as it falls within the threshold of it being categorized as high. So I drew a table or result index. Like I already explained, the dread 3, 2, 1, 3, 3 is 12. The CVS base 7.2. Already calculated that, like you can see on the previous slide. Over here, I just inputted the results in each of the slide. Now here's where it gets tricky. Calculating this With the BCR method, the results is unknown because we don't know the total benefits or the total cost of the attack using that scenario. Even though we found out the MPV, this is the MPV result, the SLE result, ALE result, ARO result. Okay, so now we come to the risk analysis table. This is where we already have the results. So we're kind of gonna input in if it's a high risk, medium, or low. So with the DREAD 12, that's high. CVSS 1.2, that's high. The MPV, we got this, but it's inconclusive. Reason why it's inconclusive is we can't tell if it's high or not because based on the scenario, we can't really find the MPV because there's several factors needed for that. Like I already said earlier, the BCR is inconclusive because we can't find the total benefit of the project. So the results is unknown. SLE is high as well. ALE is high as well. ARO high. In conclusion, cost benefit analysis, as you can see, it is very important because it can help a company make plenty decisions, and not only decisions based on how you feel or like emotional, but supported by fact, by science, by numbers, by past experiences. So in conclusion, the quantitative data is more precise because we kind of input in the information from what we have was actually the data on the ground, and we just put it into these already established formulas and calculate them. So we have a more accurate decision or more accurate results, and they're very reliable because they can always be traced back and then recalculated. In table 1, we established the risk based of each method. If we go back to table 1, this is table 1.1, sorry. What this tells us is the IT approach being the NPV and the BCR. Notice how we got inconclusive, and unknown. This just shows that for this scenario, we have to use the CS approach. We cannot use the IT approach because we're not going to get reliable, 100% accurate data to make our decisions. Another thing that we found in conclusion after this study is for best results, we cannot only use quantitative, we cannot only use qualitative. Our best bet is to use a combination of both the cybersecurity approach, quantitative plus a qualitative. This gives you a holistic calculation and a more accurate calculation, which can be defended, which can be agreed upon globally. Quantitative and qualitative risk assessment methods all have their strength and weakness. But like I said, if we're able to use both of them together simultaneously, that will yield the best results. This is my reference page for my thesis. Thank you very much for listening, and I appreciate everything. Thanks.